Okay, class. On this how-to lecture series, we're going to talk about your history essay. Now, this is for History 1301. Uh, so, our essay topic is who was the greatest general in the American Civil War? Ulysses S. Grant or Robert E. Lee? Now, I'm going to kind of put a forewarning out here to you. If a lot of my students try to really simplify this decision, and they say, well, Grant was against slavery. Grant was for the freedom of the slaves. Lee was for the freedom, was for people keeping the slaves in slavery. So Grant's my guy. I wouldn't make that decision really quickly. Guys, Grant, number one, owned slaves. Remember, the decision you're making is based on who do you think the best general was, not so much which side they were fighting for, if they were Southerners, if they were Northerners. You're looking at your decision. This is the best general of the Civil War. Guys, this is a hard paper because both of these guys were very good, capable generals. Let me explain this again. Both Grant and Lee are very efficient, capable, successful generals. Okay? So, here's what I would suggest. Keep an open mind on this decision. I would suggest I've made a series of YouTube lectures. I concentrated one on Grant, one on Lee, and I do an overview. I would listen to those before you make your mind out. And then once you've listened to those, then make your decision up, okay? So our next thing is what time period. Now, these are the things, guys, that you're going to have to answer. These are the questions. Question number one, what time period did they live in? That's a pretty simple one. What were their contributions? That's interesting, guys, because in these lectures, we'll talk about one of these generals. His military tactics are still discussed, debated, and taught at West Point. One of them. I'm not going to tell you which one because you're going to listen to the lecture series. You have to use a primary source. Now, what is a primary source? A primary source is something they wrote or one of their contemporaries wrote. Okay? Grant will write a very successful book after the war. Robert E. Lee will write several journals and articles after the war. The men that served under them, William Tecumseh Sherman will write a book. Sherman served under Grant. He will write a very popular book after the Civil War. Jubal Early, Jubal served directly under Robert E. Lee. He will write a book. There is probably the most interesting of all these guys is a guy named John Longstreet. Now, Longstreet actually served under Robert E. Lee, but he was best friends of Ulysses S. Grant. Let me repeat this. Longstreet was Grant's best friend. He was Grant's best man in his wedding, but yet he worked under Robert E. Lee during the war. Longstreet will be with Lee at Gettysburg. Longstreet will eventually work under President Ulysses S. Grant's cabinet. Really neat guy. Try to pull up some stuff he wrote. He knew both of them. He could compare both of them. What do historians say? Now, this is interesting, guys. If you're going to write a Grant paper, there's a guy out there named Ron Chernow. I'm going to spell the last name Chernow. Ron Chernow. He just recently wrote a book. The book is called Grant. Now, I will tell you right now, I've read this book more than once. It is probably the best book, hands down, for a biography on Ulysses S. Grant that you can get a hold of. It is an excellent book, and Ron Chernow always uses good sources in there. More or less, you could get a copy of this book and pull up other sources he used to write the book. Now, what about Robert E. Lee? There's a guy out there named Shelby Foote, spelling his last name Foote. Now, Shelby Foote's not alive anymore, but he is a well-known Southern historian that wrote lots and lots of cool things on the war, and he is who I would look into. Robert E. Lee paper, hands down. I mean, Shelby Foote, you can't go wrong with Shelby Foote. Okay. Now let's talk about. We know what the historians say, and do you agree with them? Well, hopefully you do, guys, because this is your guy. Your whole point of this paper is you're one of their defense attorneys. You got to defend them. Remember, guys, this is 100 points. Now listen up to me. It's got to be 4 complete pages, not 3 pages and a half, not 3 pages and almost 4 pages. 4 complete pages. It has to have a works cited page, so therefore we're talking 5 pages. Okay, guys? 5 pages. Now it's going to have to be either Times New Roman, New Carrier print. This is the number one thing students goof around on. It's got to be 12 font double space. Okay, the title is going to always be single space. The body of the paper is double space. Guys, I want you to pull up example papers that I have. The example papers will tell you how to do it. This is the last thing before we will move off of this. Guys, this is what you really need to pay attention to. You either need to stop this, make notes on it, take a picture with your phone, whatever. First of all, you have to have 8 cited sources. So we're going to go over them. 2 of them can come from the internet. Now, guys, be careful what you fish out of the internet. And I use the terminology fish. Like you go fishing, you put your hook in your worm, you throw it out there in the pond, you may catch you a big old bass. Or you may put your hook in your worm, throw it out there, and pull up an old dirty mud boot that's full of mud that's been on the bottom of the pond. Okay? When you go to the internet, I would be very careful the sources you go to. You can pull up stuff that Shelby Foote probably wrote. I would go to different colleges. I mean, man, there's tons of them. I think Gettysburg has a college that has lots of Civil War stuff on it. And there's lots of good things from the internet you can get, and there's also trash. 2 sources have to be primary. Remember, we talked about what a primary source is. 3 sources have to come from books, texts, historical basis. Now, a lot of students will ask me, this is a good question, Mr. Offer, can I get a book online and cite it? Yes, you can. That's a book and it's online. You can do that. All right, here's the one I'm always going to pay attention to. You can what? My lecture. Now, your question would be, okay, Mr. Offer, where's your lecture? Guys, I did several YouTube lectures on Lee and Grant, and I did an overview. So I can tell you there's a lecture out there on Lee, there's a lecture out there on Grant, and there's an overview, okay? Remember, your paper has to be Chicago style, Chicago footnotes. Now, before I leave y'all at the end of this, I want to point out one quick thing. What I would like you to do is to not make your mind up right now who the general is. I want you to go to these lectures. I want you to listen to all the lectures on Lee and Grant. Remember, there's one on Grant, there's one on Lee, there's an overview. I want you to listen to those lectures. After you listen to the lectures, then I want you to write your paper, okay? That's the best way to do it. Guys, that will end this. This has almost been 9 minutes, a little longer than I wanted to. Good luck. I look forward to seeing your papers.